The hum starts before you're all the way downstairs. Low, steady. The kind of sound that means everything is where it's supposed to be. The kitchen is warm. The light over the stove is already on. That refrigerator. Harvest gold, the color of late September sunlight. It stands against the wall the way it has always stood. The motor underneath it turns without complaint, the way it has been turning since before you knew what a motor was. Nobody builds them like that anymore. And there is a reason. That refrigerator your grandmother bought came from the last generation they built to last a lifetime. What replaced it was built to last 6 years. That is not a guess. That is the average lifespan of a new refrigerator sold in America today. 3 things killed the difference. The first one started as an act of wartime patriotism. The second one sold your grandmother's brand to a company in Sweden. The third one came from Washington, wrapped in good intentions. But first, you need to remember what that kitchen sounded like when it was still running right. The handle is heavier than you expect the first time you grab it as a small child. Cold chrome, solid in your hand, and when you pull, the rubber seal gives a slow, deliberate exhale. Thick gasket. Real rubber. The kind that holds. Inside, the light comes on. Yellow-white. Everything has a place. Eggs in the door rack. Milk in the back where it stays coldest. On the second shelf, a dish covered in tin foil with your name written in blue ballpoint. She always did that. You always knew which one was yours. What color were your parents' appliances? Harvest gold, avocado green, that particular shade of brown they called copper tone. If you grew up with a Harvest Gold kitchen, put it in the comments right now. I want to know how many of us remember that color. Because whoever built that machine expected it to still be running when you brought your own kids home for Christmas. You stand in front of that refrigerator in your bare feet on cool linoleum and you eat whatever she left you, cold, straight from the dish. The motor runs underneath, patient and low, doing its job the way it always does. Outside, it is 1973, maybe 74. The years blur a little at that distance. The kitchen doesn't blur. The kitchen is fixed. The kitchen is the one thing that stays. It is running right now, somewhere, if it has not been thrown away by someone who did not know what they had. When it finally goes, if it ever does, the person who finds it in an estate sale will not understand what they are looking at. They will see a refrigerator that is older than they are, still cold inside, still running, and they will assume there is something wrong with it. Because nothing they have ever owned ran that long. They have no frame of reference for a machine that simply does not stop. The companies that built it made sure of that. That is how much has changed. The coffee of that kitchen is already in your head if you had a grandmother who cooked. Coffee that had been sitting on the burner since 6 in the morning. Something in the oven by 10. Dish soap. Warm metal from the stove. The linoleum had a specific squeak near the back door that you only noticed when the house was quiet. The drawer where the good silverware lived made a sound nobody else's drawer made. The refrigerator hum was underneath all of it. The constant low note of a house that was working, that was keeping you, that was not going anywhere. What was the first thing you ate when you walked into her kitchen? Not the meal. The thing you grabbed before she could stop you. Tell me in the comments. In a moment, I am going to tell you exactly what they removed from that machine. But first, you need to understand what your mother knew about it that you were never taught. Here is what was inside that machine. Real metal parts you could see moving. The thermostat worked by bonding 2 different metals together. When the temperature changed, one metal expanded faster than the other, and the strip bent just enough to open or close a switch. No computer, no screen, no update required. A repair shop could stock the replacement part on a shelf next to the others, waiting to be needed. When the part wore out, you replaced it. The rest of the machine kept running for another decade. GE developed the engineering method that would eventually kill that simplicity. They called it value engineering. During the Second World War, the goal was to save metal for the front lines. A cheaper part that did the same job meant copper and steel went where they were needed. In 1943, that made sense. The engineers who created it understood the limits of where it applied. But after the war ended, the accountants found the method. They asked a different question. Not what can we substitute to make this better? What they asked was, what can we remove and still pass the test? And they spent the next 30 years using your grandmother's refrigerator to find out, one component at a time, year after year. She kept butter on the second shelf, not the door, because the door got warmer when you opened it, and butter in the door went soft. She knew that because she had been watching that refrigerator for 20 years. She knew which shelf ran coldest. She knew how long leftovers lasted, and she knew which shelf they belonged on. Your grandmother understood her kitchen the way a good mechanic understands his shop. She learned all of that in a class that no longer exists. Home economics. The room smelled like dish soap and something that had just come out of the oven. There were real stoves with real burners along one wall, a real washing machine in the corner. The teacher had been in that classroom long enough that she had seen the same mistakes made by 3 generations of girls and had learned exactly how to correct each one. She knew how to cook, yes, but she also knew what a refrigerator compressor sounded like when the motor was starting to labor. She knew which problems you could solve yourself and which ones needed a phone call. She taught your mother to listen. A woman who knew her machines was a woman who did not get taken advantage of by a repairman or a salesman trying to sell her something she did not need. That was not a small thing in 1966. It is not a small thing now. At its peak, more than 3 out of 4 American high school girls were enrolled in that class. Your mother graduated knowing what right running sounded like, which meant she knew what wrong running sounded like. That distinction was the difference between a $40 service call and a $400 replacement she did not need. She called the repairman early. She always called early. And the refrigerator in her kitchen ran for 31 years before anything inside it needed replacing. In 1981, the federal government restructured education funding. Not with an announcement about what would be lost. Just a budget reallocation and a new formula for distributing the money. Every district made its own decision about what to cut. Most of them looked at the same line items and made the same choice. No debate in the local paper, no ceremony. The equipment stayed in the room for a while. Then the room became a computer lab. The teacher who had been there for 20 years retired, and nobody hired a replacement because the position no longer existed. Everything she knew retired with her. There was no next classroom. There was no next teacher. There was no next class of girls learning to listen to what they owned. By 2010, fewer than 1 American high school in 10 still offered home economics in any form. An entire generation of women grew up with no one to teach them what a compressor was supposed to sound like, what right running meant, what wrong running cost. If your mother or grandmother took that class, she probably never told you what she learned there. But everything in your kitchen ran better because of it. The companies that built your grandmother's machine were still running when those classrooms closed. What happened to the factories is worse than what happened to the schools. The companies that built your grandmother's machine were not just logos on a box. Frigidaire, Maytag, Whirlpool, GE Hotpoint. Each one had its own factory, its own floor, its own workers who had been showing up to the same building for 15 or 20 years. The foreman who ran the compressor line at the Maytag plant in Newton, Iowa, knew which machines were running well and which ones needed attention before any quality inspection confirmed it. He knew because he had been listening to those machines for a decade. Machines talk if you pay attention long enough. A Maytag repairman was not a character in a television commercial. He was a real person in a real town who knew your family's machine the way a doctor knows a patient. He came to the house. He looked at the machine. He told you what it needed. He ordered the part from a supplier 2 counties over, came back when it arrived, fixed the problem, and left. That was the end of it for another 8 or 10 years. His son sometimes took over his routes when he retired. The machines outlasted the repairmen. He also knew when to tell you the truth. He would look at a machine, listen to it run for 30 seconds, and tell you it was good for another 15 years. Or he would tell you the repair cost more than the machine was worth, and he would say so before you spent any money. He was not running a replacement business. He was running a repair business. The difference between those two things matters more than most people realized until one of them disappeared. Do you remember the repairman who came to your house? Not the 800 number. Not the service ticket emailed to an address you don't recognize. The actual man with actual tools who knew your machine by the sound it made when he walked in the room. Tell me his name in the comments if you can still recall it. The compressor in a 1968 refrigerator was something that man could open with standard tools and read the way you read something familiar. He could feel what was wrong before any gauge confirmed it. He could hear it in the way the motor loaded and unloaded. He could tell you what it would cost and how long it would take, and most of the time, he was right. Most of the time, the repair held. In a few years, there would be nothing left for him to repair. Not because the machines got better, because the parts became proprietary and the companies that made them decided repair was not the business they wanted to be in. While that repairman was keeping your grandmother's kitchen running, the accountants were already hollowing out what he worked on. The compressor got lighter. Not because someone found a stronger material, lighter because lighter cost less, and the men reviewing the quarterly numbers had never stood on a factory floor. They were reading a spreadsheet, not listening to a motor. The engineers who had designed those machines came out of the war years. They had built equipment in conditions where a part that failed was not a line item. It was a story that came home with someone. That understanding lived in people on those floors, carried by foremen who had been there 15 years, by machinists who had spent 2 decades learning the tolerances of the same machines. A GE refrigerator built in 1962 could run for 4 decades. Not because GE was a charity, because the men who built it were accountable to a standard that said a machine should do what it was sold to do, for as long as the person who bought it could reasonably expect it to last. That standard lived in people, in the work handed down from one man on the line to the next. You cannot write that kind of expectation in a company manual. When the floor closes, it goes nowhere. It just stops. The people who bought those companies in the years that followed did not buy the floors. They bought the brand names, the distribution networks, the customer relationships. They bought what showed up on paper. What did not show up on paper was 20 years of a foreman in Iowa knowing which compressor was going to give trouble before it gave trouble. That knowledge had no line on the balance sheet. So when the floor closed, nobody priced it into the deal. Nobody accounted for what was lost. It was just gone. That refrigerator ran when your grandfather was still working. It ran through 2 recessions and a fuel crisis. It ran when your mother got married and moved out and the house got quieter. It ran when nobody was watching it. It ran because it was built for exactly that, and nothing that happened in the world outside had any bearing on what it was going to do next. In 1986, the second force arrived. Frigidaire was sold to a company based in Sweden, your grandmother's brand, the name that had meant refrigerator the way Kleenex means tissue. the name on the machine that had been humming in her kitchen since the early 1960s. The new owners did not care about a fridge in Ohio. They cared about the bottom line, and your grandmother's 30-year motor did not fit the math. So the math won. The workers who had built those refrigerators in Dayton did not relocate. The knowledge that lived in their hands, in 20 years of listening to the same motors do the same work, did not transfer with the brand name. It retired when they did. It was not replaced. The men who came after them were building something else, in a different building, with different parts, for different numbers, and nobody in that building had ever heard the old sound. Then it spread. Whirlpool moved production to Mexican assembly plants before the decade was out. Maytag set up assembly work in Mexico starting in 2001. Whirlpool bought Maytag in 2006. Newton, Iowa. The plant closed. GE shifted production to lower wage regions through the late 1990s. The lines that had employed American factory workers for 2 generations did not move with the work. They just closed. The hum in your grandmother's refrigerator is still the hum of a motor built by people who knew her town. The company that made it ceased to exist in its original form in 1986. The factory is gone. The workers are retired or gone. The repairman who serviced it has been dead for 20 years, and the refrigerator is still running. The third force came from Washington in 1987. They told us it was about saving power. They put an efficiency sticker on the front and used it as a reason to pull out the parts that had run without complaint for 4 decades. The simple metal strips and mechanical switches your dad never once had to think about. They could not meet the new efficiency numbers on paper, so they pulled them out. Circuit boards went in. Digital controls. Parts that could not be diagnosed with a wrench because there was nothing for a wrench to turn. Parts that a repair shop could not stock on a shelf because the parts were proprietary. Designed in one country, assembled in another, supported by the manufacturer for exactly as long as the law required. Not a day longer. You need a specialist with a computer just to tell you why the ice maker stopped. The company stopped stocking the part in the 8th year. Your grandmother's Frigidaire door closed like a Cadillac door. Heavy, certain. The new one closes like a Tupperware lid. Your grandmother's refrigerator did not get any of that. It just kept its word. 3 forces, 40 years. The first one hollowed out the machine from the inside, 1 part at a time, turning wartime discipline into a quarterly cost reduction. The second one sold the factories to companies that had never heard the motors run. The third one passed a regulation that made the old parts illegal and the new parts disposable. And the classroom that might have taught you to see it coming was gone before any of it started. How many refrigerators have you bought in the last 20 years? Count them. That number is the answer. The granddaughter who inherited your grandmother's kitchen had never been in that classroom. Nobody told her what a compressor was. Nobody told her it was supposed to last. Nobody taught her what right running sounded like, so she had no way of knowing when the machine started to sound wrong. When the refrigerator broke in its 6th year, she bought a new one. A new one that will break in its 7th year, or 8th, and she will buy another one, and another, every 6 years, forever. It is 3 in the morning. The house is quiet. The street outside is dark. And from the kitchen, the hum, low, steady, patient. The sound that means everything is where it is supposed to be. The sound your body learned to sleep to when you were small enough that someone else was in charge of keeping you safe. When the house was warm and the refrigerator was running and nobody had asked you yet to understand how any of it worked. That refrigerator has been making that sound since before your mother graduated high school. It does not know about the company in Sweden. It does not know about the circuit boards, or the parts that stopped being stocked, or the classroom that disappeared. It just keeps its word. It does the thing it was built to do, and it does not stop. It keeps working. Your grandmother bought one machine, and it ran for her lifetime. You have bought 3 refrigerators in 15 years, and the 4th is already on your radar, because something sounds different when it cycles now, and you are not sure what that means, and there is nobody left who can tell you for certain. The hum is still there. If you close your eyes, you can hear it. 3 in the morning in a kitchen that smelled like coffee and warm metal, and a machine underneath it all that just kept going. You did not know it was the last generation. Nobody told you. The same way nobody told you the last time you sat in a red vinyl booth at the restaurant your family went to every Friday, and the waitress already knew what your dad was going to order before he opened his mouth. That is gone too. And what they did to those places should make you angry.